I'm Seth Harwood. You guys have met me before. You've heard about me in the podcasting realm. Hopefully you've read and bought my book, Jack Wakes Up, now available here at Dark Carnival Books in Berkeley, California. Last week with the Palm Sunday push onto Amazon, we hit #1 in mystery on there, so that was huge. Jack is driving with these guys called the Czechs, and they stop for a little bit to discuss their next move. Vlade stops watching the cars drive by to look at Jack. "Yes?" he says. "But what the fuck?" Jack shrugs. "You know these guys weren't the ones who did the shooting. They were the ones who got shot. That seems safe to say. Plus, they don't have time to set anything up. We go meet them right now, get this thing done, and then whatever happens, you guys will have your blow to take on the trip when you leave. How's that sound?" Vlade nods, thinks it over. Al slides across the back seat to put his head out the window closest to Jack. He yells, "We should do this. Jack is right," in a Czech accent. On the podcast, there's a lot more accents going on. It's a little weird to do these in person. Vlade nods, thinks it over. Al slides across the back seat to put his head out the window closest. Oh, I already got that. Vlade acts as if he's heard nothing, nods again. In the car, David still stares straight forward, stays quiet. Vlade says, "That might not be bad, though." Jack goes for broke, puts it all on the table. Then we get to the bottom of this mess about Ralph and Mikal, deal with Tony and Junius, get this whole thing figured out and wrapped up, and you guys are off for fun in the sun, my man. He claps Vlade's shoulder to wrap it up. "Whoa, whoa, Mr. Palms," Vlade says, his hands up. "Now you go too fast. But it is good, I think." He smiles. "You feel good, no? That's good. Let me talk with others for 1 minute." As Vlade goes back over to the car, Jack checks his watch for the time. It's true. He does feel good. Better than he has in a while, though the fact that Maxine still won't answer his calls has him concerned. But damn, the sun's shining, there's less fog, and standing outside in the sun, Jack even feels warm enough to take off his jacket. He leans down to put it into the back seat of the Mustang. Just as he's bending over to do this, he sees a car coming up Van Ness, going way too fast, and then realizes there's a man in the passenger seat hanging halfway out the window with a gun. Then next thing Jack hears is gunshots as he drops into a crouch beside the passenger door of his car. "What the fuck?" he hears himself say and looks over at the Czechs. They're down inside of their car and Vlade's crouched on the sidewalk. The guy in the car fires more shots and Jack can hear bullets hitting the side of the Czech's Mercedes and breaking glass in the car. At that, his heart freezes up at the anticipation of what might come next. He starts to repeat the word "no" under his breath as the world slows down, and then chunk, chunk, chunk. He hears bullets punch against the other side of his Mustang, ripping through its pristine, mint-condition body panels, and though he hopes not, doing untold damage to its interior. "Fuck," Jack yells, over the shots. Al scrambles out the sidewalk side of the Mercedes, a large handgun drawn in front of him, and pushes Vlade out of the way as he moves to the hood of the car, leans over it, and starts to fire. He lets off 2 shots and then jacks up and running. Trying to stay low, he makes it to the Mercedes in 3 strides and knocks Al back behind the car. The sidewalk behind them is empty of people and fronted by a brick wall, but across the street Jack has no ideas if there are people behind where Al is shooting or who's in that building he might hit. With Al under him and Vlade beside him, wide-eyed, Jack asks if anyone's been hit. Vlade shakes his head. Jack stands in time to see the car that shot at them pulling away, up Van Ness, and turning around to come back. "Motherfucker," he says, then yells at Al and the Czechs to get down. Vlade slaps Al across the face. He takes his gun away and holds him down behind the car. As the other car starts to come back toward them, Jack can see now it's a Ford. The guy from the Mirage, Mr. Automatic Weapon with the bad flat top and the fancy lawyer, now wearing a bandage over the center of his face and a stabilizer for his nose, pushes his head and arms up over the roof, holding the same silver handgun that he shot at them on the last pass. "You motherfuck," Jack says, wishing for probably the first time in his life that he had a gun in his hand to shoot at someone. He can't tell if Flat Top sees him or not, but can only watch as the guy lets off a few more shots toward the Mustang. Has to hear them punch through the fine metal, hoping and praying that nothing hits the engine. And then Jack hears a pop as one hits the Mustang's back tire and he gets down low behind the Mercedes. He can already hear the air hissing out of his tire. Again Jack hears the bastard shoot at the Mercedes, but only twice, probably his last 2 bullets. If he were better at this, he would have counted the shots, it occurs to Jack. Nicky fires 2 shots out of the Mercedes window at the Ford, though Jack can't see if he hits anything from where he is on the sidewalk, on his hands and knees. Now Vlade jumps up and shoots twice at the Ford. As Jack stands, he's just in time to see its rear window shatter. He runs over to the Mustang and around to its other side. There he sees the damage, 3 holes in the door and 2 along the side of the trunk. They're small silver welts, just like you'd expect them to be, with little holes that Jack can just get the tip of his finger into. Fuck, he yells, kicking at the asphalt. He can already see the rear tire going down. Jack, Vlade yells, waving at him to come. Jack runs his hand over the smooth metal curve of the Mustang's roof and leans in the window to grab his keys. Then he takes a step back to look at his car again, the anger welling up inside him like he hasn't felt it since he was still with Victoria. He shakes his head as Vlade calls his name again. Nicky's pulling the Mercedes away from the curb, turning to go after the Ford, with Vlade climbing into the back seat and David already out on the sidewalk. Al starts toward the car, but Vlade yells at him to stay. For a second, Jack's caught in the street, watching Nicky and Vlade in the Mercedes and seeing it turn to go after the Ford. But then Nicky pulls up to where Jack stands and pushes the front door open at him. Jack meets his eyes across the seat for a heartbeat, then gets in as Nicky nods, says something to Vlade in Czech. "What are we doing?" Jack says, looking at David and Al standing on the sidewalk. Al waving his hand, yelling for them to go. "What are we doing?" Vlade says something to Nicky in Czech, and Nicky honks the horn, starts waving his arm out the window for the traffic beside them to stop. To Jack, he just says, "We go." "Watch my car," Jack yells to Al and David, throwing them his keys, as Nicky peels out into a hard U-turn across the 4 lanes of traffic, cars braking wildly to get out of their way, horns blaring as they accelerate, going downtown, toward Market, and after the Ford. Yeah. Excellent. Thanks for listening to the reading. Let's have some questions now. He's totally other people. He's not me at all. He comes from the streets. He comes from San Francisco, the East Coast, spent some time in LA. Now he's up here in San Francisco. He comes from, to some extent, a movie that Jason Statham did called Transporter, which I think is a really bad movie, even though some people disagree. But, like, I had seen that actor in Snatch, and then the next movie that I saw with him, and I thought he was kind of cool in Snatch, and then I saw him in Transporter, and literally he beat up, like, 200 men in that movie with his bare hands. He was, like, pulling his shirt off, covering his body with oil, and, like, just beating up tons of people. And I thought that was just totally absurd. Like, here's this actor that isn't Bruce Lee and I've never heard of before, and he's beating up hundreds of people in a movie. It just doesn't seem right. So I started thinking about, well, what would happen if a guy did one action movie and was, like, sort of billed as, like, this total ass kicker, and then never did another movie? How would he sort of negotiate dealing with people on the street when they sort of thought that he was this big action star, but he's really just a guy? And then what would he do? What can you do next for work after something like that? I would say that, literary influences, you'd have to go with guys like Raymond Chandler. The Long Goodbye is fantastic. Lawrence Block, Dashiell Hammett, of course. A lot of the guys that you see sort of coming up now, like Duane Swierczynski, Charles Ardai, Al Guthrie. These guys are really great. Also, coming from a strong short story background, guys like Carver, Hemingway had a lot of influence on me and how I write dialogue. But also TV shows and movies, stuff like Scarface, Pulp Fiction, Layer Cake, Sopranos, The Wire. I had published about a dozen stories in literary journals, and I really wanted to sort of think of myself as a literary writer. So when I started doing Jack Wakes Up, I thought about maybe doing it under a pen name. And then I thought, forget it. Like, I can do different kinds of books. Faulkner did plenty of different kinds of books. Writers can do this kind of thing. And so I released it under my own name. I released it as a podcast under my own name. And then the great thing about podcasting was that I could switch and start doing the short stories. And it was a totally different thing for me to do, which kind of maybe seemed a little risky. But, if someone started listening to them and they didn't like it, they hadn't put out any money. And so I think really the danger of switching genres when you're a published author is if you're publishing crime fiction and then you put out a book that's all short stories, people get upset and they're like, oh, I spent $20 on this guy, now I hate him because this isn't what I wanted to read. But in podcasting, you can listen to them, you're not putting any money in, so there's not sort of that potential for hatred. And also, it's interesting, like from the podcast audience, I've found that a lot of people have responded really well to the stories. Like I've gotten a great number of emails about the stories as well. Probably people that wouldn't have listened to the stories at first if they hadn't heard Jack Wakes Up or the Jack Palm stuff, are now listening to the literary stories and thinking like, oh, this stuff actually like in some ways reflects things that happened to me when I was growing up, reflects emotional situations that I know. And so, where some people might never read Carver or Hemingway short stories, if I can get them to start listening to my stories and maybe even reading a few because of the entry from crime fiction and podcasting, then I think that's great. And I love it when people respond well to the stories. There's a lot of my heart in those. There is no business model. The business model was to slam Amazon last week, and the idea behind that was to get people in New York to start recognizing what we've done here with podcasting, the fact that we've built an audience and that I can sell books through that. A lot of the questions that people ask about blogging and podcasting right now are how can we monetize this? And no one has totally figured out how to monetize podcasting yet, and on some level it's not a question that I'm so worried about. I'd much rather grow the audience than worry about how to get money from them at this point. I feel like I'd even rather give a couple of books away, and I've been giving away the PDF and giving away the podcasts to sort of just to get people involved and let them try out what I'm doing in writing. I sent it out to a lot of editors and agents, and they all had these weird issues with it or whatever happened with them. But I'd rather let the readers out there try it, let them try it for free and see what they think. And that part of the model has been working out really well. I think that's sort of why this happened with Amazon.com last week, why Palm Sunday blew up the way it did when I hit #1 in mystery on Amazon and number 45 in books overall. And yeah, like to that, if that's sort of the business model, then yeah, I think it's working really well. People in New York City publishing have started listening to me or contacting me a little bit this week. And, I think more good things will come out of this. The attention is starting to come, and that's really what's important. The time that elapses between when I write something and when I podcast it is shrinking, partly because I want to get stuff out because I'm excited about it, partly because I'm starting to get more confidence in myself as a writer. The technical stuff has changed a lot. I was talking to Chris today about sort of how the stuff goes in there, and I used to have to record the whole thing all the way through so that I wasn't even close to the computer, and the computer would just be recording the whole time, and then I'd have to go back and splice up all the stuff and edit out the burps and the page turnings and stuff like that, and when I said words wrong. And now I've got like a external monitor that I've attached to a long cable to the computer. The computer's under this huge pillow, and I've got a wireless mouse so that I can like stop and start while I'm recording now, and that streamlines the process a lot. So now I'm podcasting the third book, and Jack Wakes Up is the first, Jack Palms 2, This Is Life is the second. Now I'm on Jack Palms 3, and so one of the questions that's coming up is like, do we have to start at the beginning with Jack Wakes Up, or can we start in one of the later books? I hope start with one of the later books. Like if you're watching a season series like The Wire or The Sopranos or something like that, you could start with one of the later series and you might miss some of the stuff, but you'll still enjoy it. And then if you go back after you start watching it and watch the earlier stuff, you'll enjoy the current stuff even more. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like with Star Trek, every episode is self-contained. So like, if you look at the model of how TV has evolved in the past 20 or 30 years, you used to have every show was self-contained in the space of 1 hour. Now with, from St. Elsewhere to Hill Street Blues to The Sopranos, you have the evolution of different plot threads going in and out with different characters in different episodes. So a plot thread might be in a couple of places and then not pick up until the next episode. And there's no real push to like finish every episode in terms of the story. And in that way, I kind of feel sort of a similar way that, like, within the different books that I'm podcasting, not all of the plot threads need to be wrapped up. It's kind of almost like a season of a TV show now in that sense. And so that's sort of a freedom. And yeah, so I hope that people can come in later and start listening to the new stuff, because I'm really excited about some of the new stuff. Jack Palms 3, I think, is dynamite. I'm really excited about that one. And I'm hoping that people will come along and get involved in the ride for that one. And then go back and listen to Jack Wakes Up, or just go listen to Jack any way that they want to start. I think they should be able to. Do you guys think that you could do that? Does that work? So after Jack Wakes Up, there was a break between when that ended and when Jack Palms 2 started. But Jack Palms 2 and Jack Palms 3, basically Jack Palms 2 ends and Jack Palms 3 starts like right on the next day. I'm not sure yet what's going to happen with Jack Palms 4. It depends on a couple of things about how a few things play out with the end of Jack Palms 3 that I'm still working on. It also feels weird to just keep saying all these different numbers. I like the idea of doing a series. I really am enjoying writing the Jack Palm stuff, and I like him as a character, and I like some of the other characters. And I definitely want to keep doing the writing and the podcasting of this crime fiction. But I might want to explore some other things first before I do Jack Palms 4. I'm starting to work on sort of a prequel project with one of the other characters from the book that some people have been really excited about. A short version of that is going to come out in May, and then sort of after that I'll continue working on what feels like it needs to get done. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in the Jack Palms books. Hopefully, when I was reading that second part, there's some of the stuff with the Czech guys in it, and Vlade in particular, where even if I'm not trying to do the accent, it sounds sort of a little bit stilted, like the accent, just because of the syntax of the words that he uses in dialogue. And to me, like, that's when good dialogue writing is happening, is when you're not sort of like clipping words or changing the spellings of words. That seems really cheesy. But you're changing the syntax to sort of model how people speak, particularly if they come from a different first language. And so I've always sort of been in tune to that when I was writing the Czechs and the other characters who might speak a little bit differently than Jack. And so, yeah. I end up with a fair number of tongue twisters that I have to try and do while I'm doing the podcast. And sometimes while I'm recording the podcast, if I have a hard time saying something, right there while I'm recording, I might rewrite that line. But for the most part, what gets written goes straight into the podcast. And I feel like to some extent, my writing has always been kind of sort of oral, or like the pacing has kind of been how I would read it out loud. So I think that has worked really well for me in podcasting as well. The problem with the second book was that I gave away a lot of the voices, even some of the major characters, and I did that before I realized how much work it was going to be to splice in these other people's voice tracks and stuff. So with the third one, a lot of the voices I'm just doing on my own, and then if certain characters get back involved in the story from the second book, I need to bring those guys back in to do those voices. Although some of the voices of some of the Russian characters were done by listeners in the second book, and now I'm doing them in the third book just because I like the control of it. The Palms Daddies and Palms Mamas are fantastic. The Palms Daddies and Palms Mamas, they're everything. They evolved. I started getting emails from people pretty much as soon as I started podcasting the book. I started getting emails and comments on the site. And the more people would comment, I would write back to them, and sort of I built relationships with people who would keep writing consistently. I know their names. I get to meet them sometimes and recognize their faces, put a face to a name. And that part has been really exciting. And sort of like the more I've been putting stuff out, the more it seems like some people want to give back and get more involved with the process. So now I'm at the point where some of the Palms Daddies are not only doing the artwork for the cover of the book, which I think is fantastic artwork by Jerry Scullion, but now some of the Palms Daddies are designing the website. There's a new website that just got designed by Jason Andrews, who actually is in Japan, and we've been going back and forth on that. Now there's a guy in Germany who did Scott Sigler's site with the forums and stuff, and he wants to come and add forums to my site. And the great thing about that is that that will let the Palms Daddies and Palms Mamas evolve even further. It used to be that I had this page where I would have to enter in all their names and then reload the page every time that I got some new Palms Daddies and Palms Mamas. And that just got to be too much work. Now I've got a new page, jackpalms.ning.com, where people can go and sign up themselves and participate in the forums. But ultimately, soon I should be getting to the point where my main page, sethharwood.com, has places where people can sign up, has places where you can become a Palms Mama or Palms Daddy, start participating in the forums, and have a lot more stuff going on there. Once I can get you, the Palms Daddies, you guys, and Palms Mamas more involved, then I can give more to you guys. We can get your land addresses, and I can send out postcards to you guys, or special swag and schwag and stuff like that. And, you know, more cool promotions. So, Sigler had the J's already, and that seems to work really well. And I sort of like that idea of, like, the crack reference. But so I was thinking about, and Nemkov had bullet heads, and I was thinking about Palms heads, and that didn't seem like it was working at all. And so I was trying to think about how to come up with something cool. And I remember watching a long time ago a snowboarding competition where there was this guy named Sean Palmer, who was called the Palm Daddy, and he was this really cool snowboarder, and everyone called him the Palm Daddy. And so I thought, like, that's kind of cool. Maybe I can use that to sort of incorporate it. And so it was Palms Daddy, just like it was Palms Sunday. And then we got the Palms Mamas. You got to have the Palms Mamas if you're going to have the Palms Daddies, and then you got to have the Palms Babies. So you got to have all kinds of Palms people going on. So, yeah, basically that's how that evolved. And now the Palms Mamas and Palms Daddies are taking over the world and Amazon, and yeah, you can get the swag at sethharwood.com/store. It'll take you right to the site where you can buy t-shirts. I was going to wear one tonight, but I didn't wear one. Get the t-shirts. You can get them that say Palms Daddy, Palms Mama. You can get the t-shirts of the different covers. Basically, go to sethharwood.com. There you can get the free podcasts of Jack Wakes Up, Jack Palms 2, all the Jack Palms stories at sethharwood.com. You can get the PDF of Jack Wakes Up so that you can read it before you decide to go on Amazon and buy it. Free podcasts of the short stories from A Long Way from Disney, and tons of other stuff. Blog, information, forums. Online, we're going to have an article coming out in the San Francisco Chronicle very soon that Chris, who's here today, is going to be writing. We're very excited about that. I will be reading in Cambridge, Massachusetts, at a cool nightclub place where we're going to have a DJ called The Enormous Room in Central Square on March 27th. March 26th, I'm at the Porter Square Books. April 1st, I'm in New York City at Mysterious Books. If you are in New York City or close to New York City, come to that reading. It's very important that a lot of people come to that reading. And then April 2nd, I am at Robbins Bookstore in Philadelphia, and I'll be in NoirCon on the weekend of April 3rd to talk with some of the other podcasting crime writers about crime noir on the internet and sort of cyber noir, how we're sort of blazing some new trails there. And that'll be really exciting. That's where I'll be, and I'll be at my house and on Amazon.com. Go to Amazon, buy Jack Wakes Up, come to sethharwood.com, and thanks to all of you guys for showing up today. This is like reading time on a Saturday afternoon. I love this. Get comfortable, enjoy yourselves.